This episode is brought to you by Urban Outfitters.
Your life experience is much more valuable than the technical stuff. And you'll learn those technical stuff a lot quicker if you're actually doing it.
What's up? Welcome to the Hube Knows Best Pod. I appreciate your support. In return, I hope I provide you with some worthwhile gems that benefit you on your journey. At the very least, I hope I put a smile on your face. If not, hopefully you share this with someone that does benefit. And I got you next time. Again, thanks for joining today, and let's get this thing going. All right, y'all. Welcome to another episode of the Hube Knows Best Pod, where I'm going to give you the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Well, as best as I can, so help me God. So I got my boy on the pod today, Steve SmallWarner. Known Steve for about, I'm 36, so about 18 years now.
Long time.
A long time. Half my life. Steve's a really dope dude from Brooklyn. I'll let him tell his own story. But today we're going to have him on as a Black filmmaker, really just talking about his journey, how he got to where he is today, going from there, right? Because he has a pretty dope story, right? But yeah, Steve, introduce yourself. Let everybody know I got you on
here. Cool. I'm Steve SmallWarner. I am born in Brooklyn, raised in Long Island, Roosevelt to be exact. And I'm a filmmaker. I particularly specialize in vertical content, which is basically anything on your mobile device. And I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for this is a decade plus, but we might be in 15. I'm showing my age, I feel like, but yeah, that's it. I'm a father. I have a daughter that I love. And you know, I'm making films. I'll be making stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So Steve, like, it's crazy because when we met back in like 2005, we were both in the School of Business, and then we graduate, and everybody has a thing. Like, everybody has their idea of what they're gonna do after we graduate college. Like, I wanted to be a lawyer. I had decided I didn't want to do that no more, right? But you decided to go to film school.
Yeah, which I don't even know if that was a good decision. But before I left, so I graduated with a business degree from Howard University, HU. From management. Were you in management?
Yeah, it was management.
Yeah. So you already know, like, capstone courses and all of that. But while I was doing it, I think it was like it must have been my junior or senior year. I had picked up a camera and had like it was like a crazy revelation where, like, you have a crazy talent and you just didn't know.
Yeah.
So I picked up a camera because I was getting bored as hell in School of B. It was killing my creativity. And I just realized that I had a really good eye. I had a familiarity with my eye. And I was always a kind of a technical person. Like, I built a computer back in the day with my brother and all this other stuff. Like, I knew, the technology. So I picked up a camera and I ended up almost right away. Avery, I was living with Avery at the time, Avery Green, shout out to Abe.
Yeah.
And he was on the homecoming committee, and I had pitched doing videos. I had figured out that, like, there wasn't a lot of videos, and because I knew technology, I also saw, like, there was this progression in technology. Like, there was a pivotal moment. This was for all my camera and tech heads. This is when, like, 3 CCD chips turned, and you had like 5D Mark II, and digital sensors became better. So I saw that happening and saw opportunity to connect that to some videos and some bread. So I did that right before maybe my junior and senior year. I shot Homecoming, made videos for them, and also pitched that they do videos to begin with. They weren't really doing any videos at that time, which now just seems like the normal thing to do. But that's the story of me getting out of the School of B. I guess one of the interesting stories is, like, I was running track at the time, so I was able to register early. So, like, maybe my junior year, second semester, I had picked up a camera and then I was like, yo, I'm gonna enroll in like 3 courses in the School of C, and try not to get them to catch me. Um, they caught. I mean, I was able to register, but when I got in class, they were like, "This is for School of C," da da da, and I ended up having to like show the director of photography teacher, the cinematography teacher, and a couple other teachers my work because like I wasn't nowhere near the School of C,
Right.
and they let me stay. So I was able to take like three pivotal. Those 3 courses kind of changed or got me into shooting, and then it was it after that. I just never stopped. I was like, I'm gonna just keep doing this, and hopefully my business degree will mean something.
I mean, I think the crazy thing is like I got into school of business because they didn't have a pre-law program, right? At Howard, right? And because I wanted to be a lawyer, I wanted to do corporate law and corporate litigation. And I always looked at like the school of B, like that's going to give me a structure because I'm gonna have a business one day. No matter what I do, I'm going to go into business for myself. So I needed to have these structures and understand how organization is run. Um, Even when I did my MBA recently, people were like, "Oh, what are you going to do with that?" I was like, "Bro, I don't really need the MBA. It's for a network, and also kind of teaches me from a higher level of like how to look at scaling organizations and things of that nature." I'm pretty successful without the MBA. Like at this point, like I'm in my 30s, but that's dope that like you kind of like happened into this out of boredom. Like really is what you're saying. Like you were bored with the curriculum, right? And I think that's why I always tell like kids like, hey, school is what you make it, right? Like you're going to get an education, like asking an 18-year-old, and I think in your case, you were like 16, 17 coming into college, right?
Yeah, I was 17 when I came into college. I couldn't get into a couple of them parties.
Yeah. And like asking someone that's a teenager to make a decision about what they want to do for the rest of their life uh, is always asked backwards to me. Like, bro, the amount of times I know people who change degrees, like Dom changed his major like 3, 4 times. Like so many of our friends like changed their like concentration or their major is like it. You're bound to like realize at a certain point, like, hey, this is actually not what I want to do. But I guess I'm so far along now, I got to figure it out. Like you said, you grew up being like a very technical person and kind of basically what it sounds like dissecting everything.
Mhm.
And looking at it in more detail. Like, do you think part of that is growing up in New York or like, even like wanting to do film and like cinematography, like, New York is big lights, big city, like it's the entertainment industry. Do you feel like that kind of influenced it a little bit?
Not real. I mean, it did eventually. So eventually, when I started, I really was drawn to cinema specifically because I was nice with the camera, like I was good, but like that became, I think, one thing that um, I feel like most filmmakers would agree with, and or at least this is my experience. Is very you learn how to make something look good quickly.
Mhm.
Like, ironically, people are always amped up about like looking good and all that, and like you kind of figure that out kind of quick. And once you figure that out, it's kind of like, all right, so what's keeping you here? Like you can make something look good, but what is that something? And what are you actually doing besides making it look good? Like, what purpose is this for? And I think that when I started to like dive into cinema, especially world cinema, like I wasn't really like a Hollywood cat. Like when I grew up, I was watching like Disney and stuff like that. I guess I didn't have cable at home. So I really wasn't,
Right.
I don't know. I wasn't into like Hollywood per se or like bigger motion pictures. But I remember watching like Pi Darren Aronofsky, and it was just like this is wild confusing, and I feel some sort of way, but I don't know why I'm feeling this way. And I say world cinema, and I bring up Darren Aronofsky. I mean, at the time in New York, independent cinema was something that I paid attention to a lot more. Obviously, Spike, but like I think really being able to what connects New York for me is that I was really into independent filmmaking in New York. Jim
Right.
Jarmusch, seeing New York as a backdrop was like a big thing to me, or at least it was a thread that kind of excited me about making film. But that was later on. When I was in New York, I was just running around New York. Like I said, I was born in Brooklyn, and my family got a brownstone in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, when it was Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
Not the Brooklyn that it is now.
And there was like, like crackheads, and like there was things happening around. One of the things that kind of always connected me to Brooklyn, specifically the city, was there was a lot of people that looked like me around. Like I'm still very tight with my neighbors. Um and but I grew up in Long Island. And in Long Island, it was just a different space. I felt kind of like between two worlds. I didn't have necessarily an outlet other than sports at the time. I played soccer since I was like 7, and was good at it. I was captain of the track team, captain of the soccer team, all of that. And I think something that really resonated with me from playing soccer to filmmaking was the idea of like there's these separate parts working together for a single goal.
Right.
And I found my soccer brain, my football brain was really in tune with being able to organize chaos. Like I could see things happening, and I can be intuitive to the play. And you really need that as a filmmaker. Filmmaking is a chaotic activity. So being able to kind of like organize it and kind of see and make decisions where you need to make them became like a superpower for myself. When I even before the technical aspects and all that, like it was just like I could just see what is needs to happen and decisions that need to be made. And that was really the link, I would say, that got me into a space where I'm like, okay, maybe I should have been doing this all along instead of sitting in this B-law class that's killing me right now.
Right.
As you know.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you correlate your athletic background and like what you learned in soccer, right? Because I was thinking like, okay, well, you're playing the sport and it's kind of individualistic a lot of times when you're playing the sport. But you, to your point, as a director, like as a filmmaker, you have to make sure that the sound is right, the lighting's right, the actors are doing what they're supposed to do. Everything has to go well while you're doing your part, right? You have to know what everybody else is doing while you're doing your part, right? As a former athlete myself playing football, like a lot of times you have to understand like how the team makes the whole, right? Like if we all do this one thing, we come together, we can accomplish this great thing, right? So as I think it's really dope correlation, because I don't think I ever thought about filmmaking and sports being any type of like correlation at all.
Heavy correlation. It's ironic too, because it's like until I made the correlation for myself because of my experience. Like when I said I played soccer, I mean that was what I was doing year round. I was playing sand soccer in the summer. I did run track in high school. I went state for the pentathlete, which is still a bunch of different activities
Right.
for one school. Like everything, but specifically soccer, it really did help me. I was a center forward in soccer. So, and sometimes I played center midfield. Sometimes we played 2 up, 4 in the middle. I would be the top of the middle. If anybody knows a little bit of football out there, soccer. And you really constantly are seeing the bigger picture. Like you're constantly like looking at the form of like the strengths and weaknesses that you have. How can you use those to your advantage in order to score? And in filmmaking, you are constantly fighting resources. No matter if you're scaled up to $1 million project or not, or multi-million dollars, once you allocate those funds, right, no matter how big the film is, you are juggling resources. And the major resources that threads a smaller motion picture or indie film with something that's like a studio picture is time. You know, there's a famous filmmaker named Andrei Tarkovsky that has a book called Sculpting Time. And he likens it to sculpting. And it's very much so that like time is, you can have all the money in the world, but you ain't gonna get more time. So being able to navigate everybody in a specific amount of time is very relatable to sports, right? Like you got a certain amount of time, certain quarters to make it happen.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
So pivoting back, like kind of to the journey of becoming, like, get to the point where you are now. I think part of your program, you were like in Asia, or like you were in Asia, like for the majority of your program. Like, so like, why did they have y'all in Asia? One, but like, what was that experience like? You know, learning how to do film, or to become a filmmaker while studying in Asia.
So some of my film, I talk about my filmmaking journey a lot, kind of haphazardly happened. I was always really good at making intentional choices, though. Even when I was in the school, it would be like, I would take entrepreneur before they had entrepreneurship. I took as a major, I took entrepreneurship classes and kind of tried to structure it around working for myself. I was always into that. The way that I went to NYU Tisch Asia for a master's degree in international media producing. After I did 3 homecomings and structured the deal for them and like figured out the resources and then shot and edited and did all these things, I was like, yo. And it was just me and 2 other people, another producer or 2 other producers doing all that stuff. I was like, I need to figure out where to get the money. I got to figure something out. So I started to look up a bunch of different courses that I can maybe learn more, but not necessarily stay for a 5-year filmmaking program. Because for me, I was like, yo, I have 3 in the can already. Like I already did these 3 things. I'm learning a lot kind of better doing it than I was trying to move from somewhere else. So I was actively looking for a film program or a place that understood story and also understood technology. I came up in a time, like I said, when I saw the technology shifting rapidly. Matter of fact, in one of my entrepreneurship classes, shout out to Kathy House at Howard University, and one of my entrepreneurship classes, she allowed me to create this idea with the team of like being able to schedule a film that you could watch at a theater, and the back into it would all be digital. At that time, that was kind of an innovative, radical idea almost. And, that wasn't that long ago. But to give context to the audience, when I first in 2000, I got into NYU Tisch Asia. And so I was in Singapore for 2 years. And that fall, I think Netflix was at like $9, something like that. This is 2011. And it quickly shot up something crazy, like $500, something like that. This was around the time when the stock price. This was around the same time, and definitely double check that. But it's a portion of the book that I wrote on vertical. But at the time, Netflix was just coming into the game. They were just kind of theorizing if it would disrupt or not, and it was still doing DVDs. So just to give the audience context, I was in a time when I saw these things happening, and I was looking for a program that understood that there was going to be a major shift and that they would prepare people for it. So I looked at NYU. this kind of innovative program for international media producers. And I looked at MIT. MIT had a program for media. MIT's program was heavily technology. And I had a real craving for a story. I wanted structure. I wanted to be able to understand story because I could feel it and see it, but I couldn't necessarily like sink my teeth into it. So I chose to go to NYU, and it was a 2-year program. I lived out in Asia. I watched a lot of Asian cinema. Yojiro Unzo became someone that like really, as a director, there's a few directors that are like, yo, they were really, practicing craft at a time, at a completely different time. Wong Kar-wai, like a bunch of Asian directors that I would have never known. I watched, and it was a very small program. So we're all family at NYU Tisch Asia. I don't even think Tisch Asia exists anymore, mind you. But we still are very close knit in a sense. And they a lot of filmmakers that came out of the program went on to work in Hollywood. They are the names at the end of the credits that you see, so on and so forth. So it was a dope experience for me. I was able to like shot a documentary out in Thailand. I kind of learned how to make films in the wilds, to be honest. Like there's not, it's Asia was the wild, wild west, especially at the time for filmmaking. And that's not to say that have a structure, but it wasn't out of the structure. So
like it's kind of like guerrilla warfare, like for filmmaking.
yeah, and when I say this, I mean like we sat down with the MGA in Singapore. We spoke to them. We went to the Hong Kong Film Festival. So there's definitely structures. But when if you write a film, depending on what it is, it has to go through the government essentially, into China specifically.
It's over there, right?
So yeah, so things are different. So you get a lot of more people doing guerrilla filmmaking and really just going out there and just making it kind of. It has that essence of I think what independent cinema used to be in America, sort of.
So like with that in mind, like how has that influenced like you say you focus on vertical content, right? Because I went to your website, I saw you were like vertical content, and I think I saw you talking about on Instagram like how the world is kind of like short form media, right? Like part of the reason I have this podcast is really because people consume information in short form. Like if you try to give them information in a book or a long documentary, they're gonna turn it off, right? So like you have to give people information in bite-sized chunks, right? So like how did that kind of influence how you go about making film?
Man, that is a crazy story, to be honest. When I went to, I mean, it's influenced my storytelling a lot in the sense that, I'm very aware of audience in a different way. But I think one of the things that it made me realize is that like I had this love of a craft, that could be accessed. There's films that were made by filmmakers in war-torn countries and stuff like that could evoke emotion. The craft itself, not the business around it. So I kind of fell in love with this craft. And then one of the first papers that I had to write when I was in my master's program was a question of does size matter? And and it made us start to I was already kind of into technology and where things were going, especially from a distribution side. Like, okay, I came from the internet. We're digital natives. So I'm like,
yeah,
I came up, LimeWire, Napster, like we could get this.
And now we got the internet on our phone.
Exactly. So what if we could distribute direct? And now what if there was a world where the screens, these smaller screens really outnumbered the bigger screens that we have? What does that world look like? And it was back then, this was in 2011, that we were starting to ask these questions. And it felt almost heavy, theoretical at the time. But even when I was in Singapore, I would get on the train. I lived in West Geelong. So I had to get the train to get to the campus, and everybody would be on their phones. And I kept thinking about this as I was typing this paper, and I was like, "Yo, if this is the future, we really need to think about like who is the audience and what is a mobile audience." Because they're not the same audience that goes to the theater. They're not the same audience that is at their crib passively watching. And that really changed everything for me. Like just thinking about that was like this small thread in my brain that I couldn't let go of. Like this was years ago, and to this day, I still remain excited about it because it's more obvious to see now. But back then, people were like, "Steve, what are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Yo, things are gonna shift. There's like we can actually access our story directly to a device, and the people watching that are going to be different kinds of viewers.
Right.
They, easy stuff is like, yo, their attention span is short, but like even that has become very surface level. It's like, yeah, shorter content for sure. But then like what can shorter content do? What does it have over longer form content? And that's when I started to get into like the depth of the content, the intimacy of it, like start really peeling back the layers, using the craft that I already knew to kind of like put them together. And that really became a lot of what's just happens. It came from a theoretical space to like it just year after year there will be something that's like, yo, everything's going short form. Everything is going to the mobile device. And what does that look like? What's natively mobile then? Like what is native mobile? And when I started asking those questions, with my knowledge of cinema, I have a pretty deep historical knowledge of cinema, um, which is not hard to get. It only really came up at the turn of the century. So, um, you know, coupling those things together put me in the place that I am now, where like, I specialize in mobile content. I still write feature script films. I still practice the craft of making it, on a bigger canvas. But having done so much work on the smaller canvas, I can recognize through lines. It's made me a better filmmaker in an incredible way that I try to, every time I talk to younger filmmakers, I tell them like, everyone tells you to make a short, but make your short, like make your film and make it as short as possible to play with. Like your experience is going to be what it is in filmmaking. Like your life experience is much more valuable than the technical stuff. And you'll learn those technical stuff a lot quicker if you're actually doing it and not planning to do it. So like,
Yeah,
I've gotten caught too.
it's crazy you said that because like, doing this podcast thing, I just went to a summit in Miami, and that's the biggest thing I took from it is like, and I kind of knew it was like, you're not going to get better at something. You're not going to get good at something unless you're actually doing it on a regular basis, learning from your flaws, being like, oh, that didn't work. I don't want to do that again. That's great advice for anyone that's trying to learn a skill or pivot into something that they've never done before. Is like the best way to learn is to actually do it and fail. Like
fail. And that is the opportunity that I saw. Like I went to did my master's in international media producer. So we worked with the directors and stuff like that. At the time, I still wasn't sure if I wanted to direct, even though like everyone's like, Steve, like you could do this. And I'm like, I know, but I want to see the other parts to it. That was a big proponent. Just being in a position where I was observing other directors move and do stuff, and kind of being able to be like, yo, this and learning how to like break down scripts and like actually like how much does a film cost? How do you estimate how much a film costs? And being able to break it down and all that other stuff. When I saw that, I was like, yo, I understand why people make short films, because I mean the cost of making a feature film is absorbent. It's I always try to equate filmmaking and the business essentially to real estate.
Mm.
Because if you want to make if you want to make a house, where to make the house, depending on where you are, depending on the resources that you have, obviously. But it's a high range market. It's $1 million is not really that much in the real estate market per se.
Right.
$500,000 house, maybe you can make that with 2 or 3 hundred thousand, but it's not going to be the $1 million house. So that's very similar to short form and feature films. When we're talking about cinema as a product, I try to make sure those things are too different, because sometimes I'm talking to passionate craft people of cinema where I feel like money has to do with it, but the business models, as we can see, are old. So we shouldn't be holding on to any kind. The Hollywood model isn't actually any model anymore. So, I try to decide make those distinctions. But as a cinema product in an industry, it's very much so like real estate. So making short form and being able to do that rapidly, being able to I can make one, I could test my ideas out. They don't work. I didn't spend that much money. I didn't spend that much time, and I didn't have that much money to spend on anything. I have some classmates like, yo, we're gonna spend 20K on a short film. I'm like, chill, bro. Like, if I can't make that back, I just came from business school. If I can't make that back, I can't put that up. So
Right.
it was like that. That's exactly what it was like, for me, at least.
Yeah. And I guess to that point, like, I think a lot of times people see the Steven Spielbergs, the people that are like known like filmmakers and the success stories, but like, could you speak to like the struggles of like being an up and coming filmmaker, someone that, and like what that looks like, and like what maybe even what you've gone through there?
Filmmaking's not easy, y'all. It's not easy. It's not easy. Um, it's not easy from a craft standpoint, and it's not easy from a business standpoint. Back then, I knew that the proliferation of video was going to be crazy. Like, I knew back then, when you started to see synthesizers and digital sensors getting better, that means people were going to be able to produce video. That means the infrastructure of video also had to, increase. Like, our Wi-Fi had to get better. Like, things had to just increase. So I knew that there was going to be a high demand for video. So I was like, yo, I'm going to be good. But no matter how you cut it, just like an entrepreneur in any other business, it's just not easy. As an independent filmmaker, and I'm proudly independent, and a big thing that I learned from learning how to make films outside of the country is that, I can make a film, I can make anything anywhere.
Right.
Which I think is incredible for when I went to Hollywood and talked to people, and I was doing my best to connect the dots to a vertical filmmaking as an independent form of filmmaking. You realize quickly that people know how to make a Hollywood model, but they can't really actually make it themselves, their own kind of film, their own kind of cake, if you will. If you're making an apple pie, you can get, it from the store, or you can make your own. And I think the ups are amazing. The ups are incredible. To be able to make something from scratch, get paid to do it, get paid well to do it in a short amount of time. You can make, from a money standpoint, you can make your year in a matter of weeks, if not days, depending on where you're at, like in the game, how much you're worth as a brand. Let's say where you get the Steven Spielbergs, they're at the 1% of the top of the DGA, for example. Or now you're recognizing it more now. I think people have a better idea of it because they see the writers and the actors on strike. The writers who make all of that money, 1%, the actors that make that 1%.
Yeah.
There's a whole industry behind them that really works hard. They make it tick. I I would point out the ITSE too, the below the line union. They make this tick. You know what I'm saying? Without them, you don't have people, you don't have construction workers to build a house. You can have the architect and all of that. But if you don't have actual somebody to make the product, what are you going to do? And that itself, as far as my journey goes, I had to learn how to scale something that is difficult to scale as an independent. It's difficult to scale by yourself. You could be what they call a video. I used to hate being called a videographer, but you could be a videographer in the sense of being by yourself and getting bread and all of that. But how long can you do that? I did it for a while, for a long time. But I had to start learning how to connect to different teams and how to, move in a way where I can create more substantial work. I can get paid better. And there's no union behind you. There's nobody behind you when you're independent, traveling around the world, making things work. So the ups have been really dope and the downs have been really low. Sometimes, especially for what I was doing, because it was somewhere in the middle of my journey where I felt like if nobody was going to focus on the mobile screen, which I consider to be the first screen, if nobody was going to focus their storytelling on it, and nobody was going to speak on it as its own thing, I needed to do it. I mean, innovation kind of makes me more excited than anything else, really. And being able to see something that you're like, yo, this is for sure going to hit. This is for sure going to be it. After saying that so much and not seeing anything move, and I just got tired. I used to talk to people at ad agencies, marketing departments at ad agencies, and all this other stuff, and talk to them, talk about all of this stuff. And I was just like, yo, I'm tired. I got to make this happen. So in trying to make it happen, I experienced a lot of downs, a lot of doubts. It really tested my spirit of what I knew and what I felt intuitively to be true. And I think a lot of filmmakers that are maybe not even doing anything innovative, they just want to make their film. They can go through that because it's a heavy task to take on. It's not the simplicity that you see from watching something or your ability to be like, yo, that was just trash or whatever. It's a privilege to be a critic.
Right.
It's a privilege to be a critic. When you really want to make it, when you really want to make a house, for example, it's different than just shopping for a house. Right. So, I think that many filmmakers, what I've experienced, especially in the last couple of years, is this kind of like low in energy from filmmakers because of what the industry is and all of that. And I went through that low years prior. So now in these past couple of years, I've really been adamant about really empowering filmmakers and really empowering people to continue to tell their stories and not wait for the traditional methods to figure themselves out, because we have such an opportunity right now to distribute directly to consumer, for example. We know that D2C is huge. My business acumen from being in the School of B hit me crazy in these times because I started to see more creative economics to the system, where we can actually produce films with smaller crews with more efficiency. There's a lot of waste in film, a lot of time wasted in the sense of, you have, for example, whenever you have a big crew and you have a small scene to shoot, you'll look around and see everybody waiting. And in the industry, it's called like they'll say like you're rushing to wait. And that's kind of like something that I think every filmmaker understands. But when you scale that to like, yo, you have 100 people waiting around and 3 people shooting the scene, there starts to be kind of like, just from a standpoint of innovation through production alone, or the phase of production alone, you start to see like, yo, there could be more, we could be doing this more efficiently. We can be doing this in a way that the numbers make sense economically and that more people can tell their story. So
Yeah, I think that's
I don't
interesting.
know if that's a question or not, but
Oh, it did for sure, because like see filmmakers, or they think they're like, oh, I can go do this, right? But they don't understand the ins and outs of it. Like, hey, yeah, those people you see, they're the very small percentage. Like, it's like the dudes you see playing professional sports, the billionaires, they are the rare ones that had the opportunity or had the leg up or whatever reason they were in position to capitalize at that point. That's not going to be everybody's story, right? Um, and it's interesting that you bring up the lean filmmaking, right? I think like in my program, we talked a lot about being lean, a lot of businesses figuring out how to be lean. And I think that's just going to be like business and culture the more we move forward, like the over hiring, the overpaying, whatever, like just creating roles that have no real dollar value. Like we see that with Elon at Twitter, right? Like that was a terrible experience for a lot of people. But when you look at it from a business standpoint, there are a lot of people that had jobs that were just filling seats. Like it did not drive revenue. It did not make the business better. It just made people feel better, right? And when you're in business, you're there to make money. Like at the end of the day, if we're not making money, we not what are we doing here, right? Like it's great for this to be great value. Like it's great, like if you're making people feel good, you're providing opportunities and all those things, but like nobody's getting in business to be in debt or be broke, right? We not that's not,
right. And to be fair, to it all, I do think that like, especially when you talk about Twitter, because I think that even the creators of Twitter, they kind of felt this need for it to transition into more of a utility. And I think we're seeing that.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate that it had to be that way from what it was, because, a lot of people lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Things, things seem to be even radical, as far as, what is happening, at Twitter. But I would say that most startups are the same, except when you got $1 billion on the line, it's different. Similar for TikTok, I would say. I'm sure that the environment at a TikTok still has somewhat of a startup energy.
Mhm.
Just in the basis that like we're in a time where we're dealing with things that happen very quickly, even though they don't feel like that. Like TikTok didn't exist a couple years ago, but it feels like it's been around forever.
Right.
And then we could point out wine and all these other things. So I think in coming up in our time, when we were in college, the lean startup and startups in general, and that kind of bubble uh, was hot, and those ideologies were hot fire. Like, how do you create something new? And I think now we're in a space where it's not just making something new, but we're experiencing contraction. How do you contract, but then contract in order to expand? So we're getting more into the depth and the nitty gritty of how things connect. How do they work together efficiently? And I think that's slightly different than just creating a lean startup and it's kind of like running real fast to get your momentum. This is much more about how do we make pieces that work efficiently separately and together. And I
Right.
think we're seeing the same thing in filmmaking. What a lot of It's ironic what you see as far as complaints from like the writers union and stuff like that, are business maneuvers in order to mitigate costs, right? Smaller writers' rooms, stuff like that, where like writers, if you have a smaller room for a shorter amount of time, of course you're gonna be upset. You're not getting paid the same,
Right.
and then you're getting paid less because this may not go to air or may not be distributed. But and this is not to say that the unions shouldn't be striking; they should definitely be striking. But while they're striking, being able to actually, for a union, especially for a writers union, for the example that I just had, where it's like, yo, smaller writers rooms are actually making the quality of work that we watch. How do you now own that? Would be my question as an innovator, right? How do you now own that and take advantage of that? And it's the same thing um, that I look to do, or that I'm actually just in the process of constantly doing with mobile filmmaking and making things directly for the mobile device. Like, how do a lot of people that I talk to don't even care about necessarily mobile. It's just some of the ideas that came from this really do create efficiencies in production, efficiencies in distribution. So, you know, I think we're seeing it around the board in every industry, but definitely if I was to link them, I would say that just to get back to the Twitter thing, Twitter is becoming utilitarian. And one thing I say about mobile video is mobile video is utilitarian first and foremost. Beyond it looking good, beyond telling a story per se, it's very utilized for example, e-commerce.
Right.
Those videos aren't crazy creative; they're just moving, and that's what we want to see. So even stuff like that, I think, is starting to become much more a part of our generation. Where we're kind of breaking down into the nitty gritty of what things are, what is video, and what is, in Twitter's case, what is a public utility as a social app. What does that look like? Does that allow everybody to be on it? Yes. Does that mean that you're going to get a few curse words, spray painted on the ground like we see any other public utility? Absolutely. So I guess that's the way I think about it, at least.
This episode is brought to you by Zales. The way you're thinking about it is, in a way, it's uniquely your own, but it's also like something to think about. Is like, where, like, I think for me, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here, is like looking at the strikes, right? In the film industry, right? And your wife is someone that's part of SAG, right? So like, and so that directly impacts your household. Is
Yeah.
like, how do we look at that? Like, yes, there are people striking, and I think a lot of times when people hear something about a strike, they're like, oh, they're just striking because they're complaining about something, or maybe the conditions are terrible. And I think there's always a balance, right? Like, the conditions may not be great, but the reason that those conditions exist may be because of things going unchecked, right? And that's kind of how I look at Twitter and a lot of these layoffs with a lot of these organizations, is like, hey, we what's the phrase? We got a little over our skis, right? Like, we over indexed for our growth, and now the year over year dollars ain't making sense, right? Right. I'm at LinkedIn. Like, yes, we grew this last year, but we didn't grow in the way that leadership expected us to grow, right? Still billions of dollars, but not the billions of dollars that they wanted, right? And so how do you scale back? How do you become more efficient and more effective in your business, right? And I think Twitter, right? Like, the crazy thing is, the day after the Twitter layoffs, my MBA program was having on site with basically their chief security officer for IT, right? So we're having this conversation with him about people going to work and not being able to badge in, him having to remove access from people. But it's not because there was any malice in it, but it's like, hey, we've over-indexed on where we were going to go, and we're spending money, we're burning through money that in a way that's not sustainable, right? And so Twitter being a public utility, right, using a lot of short form content, using a lot of video content, right, vertical content, there are going to be some shifts in how we utilize Twitter and how they go to market, because, hey, we don't have time to focus on some things that you guys were utilizing the platform for before, but also this is a place for everybody to utilize. So we can't alienate any of our customer base, because that's going to affect our dollars, right? And we also got to monetize this in a way that makes sense. Like, we've stayed away from that for too long.
Yep.
Yeah. So pivoting into like the family thing, like, so not you're a family man, right? So I've known your wife as long as I've known you, right? And our kids are actually like 2 weeks apart in age. Just like a little girl of 2 New York parents, she's moving really fast. She's walking before my son was walking. She's talking. She got her own teeth. I think Sash posted that she's crawling in her own stroller now, right? Like, how do you balance being a husband, a father, and, being a filmmaker at the same time, right? Like, I know there's a lot of things going on in your personal life. Like, we're not gonna get into that, but like, just like keeping the balance and keeping the creative mind and not letting the distractions of, these great things, but they're distractions, right? From, doing your work.
Oh yeah. Man, I wish I wish I could say something magical right now. There's a lot of, it's my brother said something. My brother has my niece and nephew. My brother said something to me that resonated later on when Sasha was still pregnant. He was like, "Yo, you're gonna get punched in the face," and he says stuff like that all the time. So I'm like, well, yeah, whatever. But I think when I think about competition, and I'm gonna talk about being an athlete and all of that. When you get into competition, you know that there are certain risks. If you were to walk into a boxing ring, you can know that, I'm gonna get punched in the face. That's not actually the biggest thing to be concerned about. Like, that's not even. But once you're okay with that, once you're okay with the fact that you're gonna get hit hard, then you start to actually, figure out other things. So like, if you were in the boxing ring, you took the first hit and you're like, okay, I know his power now. You can move. And I think that's what it felt like to have a child and to be creative and to have my wife also be a creative. It's not like one of us is like, regular, and not to, I think working a regular job is amazing, to someone like me. But I think that, understanding that there's a lot that you can't control, helped. My spiritual practices, I became Buddhist, in my time on my journey, and really started chanting, really helped, ground me. And I needed that. Any sense of faith, especially when you're trying to do something that is taking something, an idea, and making it real. It's important to ground yourself in that type of faith, especially when an idea is something like a child. There is a sense of, I call it the circle of care when I talk to other fathers, because I've been talking to a lot of fathers lately, and uh, and soon to be fathers like Dom.
Right.
But I call it the circle of care. Like um, I have to care for my child, I have to care for my wife, and then I care for myself. And that order is constantly changing. And we all know the idea of gotta put the oxygen mask on first. But that's not necessarily life. That's just not what it is. And being able to manage how much I care for myself, and care for my daughter and care for my wife is something that is a constant juggle. You're constantly juggling. And one of the things that I found to be really helpful is that I stopped compartmentalizing things. I stopped compartmentalizing things. I used to be like, "Yo, this is my work. This is what I do here. This is what I don't do that anymore." If it doesn't reside within the boundaries of life, if it doesn't fit in to my life, I can't afford it. Whether that be the energy, the time, or the money. To be honest, like I really just have everything flow together, and that doesn't mean that I don't, as I'm highly creative, and I know that. And the thing that makes me highly creative is my structure. So I still structure my day. I still have routines. I've been an athlete all my life. So like routines, discipline, that comes second nature to me. Like I can do the same. Like I said, I run 9 miles a week. I can do the same thing on routine. And that really gives me some space to be creative. That gives me, while running, that gives me space, especially if I'm like writing a story at the time, it gives me space to think. Um, Prioritizing exactly the things that I need for myself, and creating boundaries around those things, really helped. Uh, it's one thing when you're single and when you're 20 or something, like you're doing your thing. There's a sense of discovery still, and I think in just being a human being, there'll always be a sense of discovery. But knowing the things that you need, actually, like when you're depleted, not the things you think you need, you know what I'm saying? That is a game changer. Because you may think you need something that it was actually just been a want all this time, that you were able to kind of like feed yourself. You could be potentially feeding an ego around it. And, you know, uh, there's no space for that, especially with a child. There's no space for ego. There's no space for you being in a space that is too rigid. Um, and I guess my ability to manage chaos is something that helps that, because there's times when it's like right when and you're a father, so you should right when you think you got it, you get punched in the face. So
What Mike Tyson say, everybody got a plan to get punched in the mouth, punched in the face.
it's like, you can have all the planning in the world, all the routine in the world. But that's the important part about faith, because when you don't have those things that you feel like you need, what are you falling back on? To just gain a sense of yourself. I meditated a lot. I chanted a lot. When Sayla was first born, my daughter was first born. I took her to the park, and meditated with her. I chanted with her in my arms. Those things really helped that chaotic first couple months. Mm-hmm. And then as far as being creative, and I'll end my rant with being creative is something that is also a muscle. You don't have to always be creative the way you know how to be creative. Sometimes I'll just do it on a piece of paper if I see an empty canvas of paper somewhere around. Sometimes it won't be about me being creative in the form of creating something. It may be a creative act. Me and my wife are both creative. So sometimes she'll bust into the room acting like somebody from some, 19th century, whatever.
Right.
And instead of being like, sometimes, because I'm more of I'm not an actor.
Right. You're the more of the serious person.
Well, so when she does stuff like that, sometimes I'll be like, "What's she doing?" But I found myself more being like, falling into it and doing kind of that say yes mentality that we see impulse do a lot. And just being in that moment. Anything that will get you present will 10x your creativity,
Yeah.
hands down.
Now I think that's a really dope thing to share. Just like from I think the creative part of it is super dope because like I know like a lot of times people get blocks because they got so much shit going on in life, right? You got the wife, you got the kids, you got the bills, you got whatever, and you don't have time to think about anything creative. But finding the creativity in life, right? Just what's happening around you is important. I think the other thing you pointed out is like being flexible as a father and as a husband, right? Like I I am a person that believes in structure, right? Like you said, control chaos, right? Like even my house doesn't have to be perfectly clean but I know where everything is, right? And if something's not where it's supposed to be, it will piss me off, right? But when you have that child, you have to kind of like remove part of yourself, not in a bad way, but like, hey, this child doesn't know that about you. This child doesn't know that these structures are in place. And also they didn't ask to be here. So you have to pivot until they're self-sufficient to their every whim, right? Um, because it's bigger than you, right? So yeah, I think like to your point, like I hold my son and I pray with my son, like, and I cry because it's like this is something I asked for, like this is something I've always wanted, right? Um, and like I tell everybody, it's not exactly how I pictured it, but he's here now, right? And the joy that I have, like seeing him be a little person and figuring things out and like working through like his emotions, right? And his discovery of life. Um, and even having to wake up at 6:30 in the morning because he has a feeding schedule. Like, I want to stay asleep, right? Like, I don't want to get up. Like, I don't want to wake up. I don't want to wake up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to check his diaper to make sure he didn't like use the bathroom on himself in his sleep, right? But it's deeper than that. Like I'm one of the people that just I would sleep. When I'm asleep, I'm asleep. That is not a thing when my child is here. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah, but I think also my son has motivated me to lean into my creativity doing this podcast and things of that nature because it's like I gotta find space for myself because before my child was here, I could travel and go do whatever I wanted to do, right? But now that's not a thing because I have to be here for the little dude. Well, how do I, still pour into myself, right? Get to do the things that I like to do. So like my podcast is really me talking to my friends, right? Like I don't have time to be on social media as much. I got to focus on work. I got to focus on my kid, but it's also a way of me like leaning into my purpose. Like my purpose, I feel, is to provide resources to other people that they may not have, right? So if there's an aspiring young filmmaker on watching this podcast, now they understand what that journey looks like and that they don't have to always follow that traditional way of doing film, right? And understanding that, hey, there are people doing this, you can do it independent. If you want to do like the big films, understand that that's going to come at a very big cost, right? Right.
Different cause.
But you can also navigate that while being a father or being a husband. Like just because life happens doesn't mean that you just have to drop what you do.
It levels you up. It levels you up. At the end of the day, it's like getting into a bit like it's just like any other activity or any other sport or athlete. Anything. We learn by being around people that are better than ourselves. And I think one of the things that fatherhood and I could only assume from what I see of motherhood from my wife is just the idea that like it your child is kind of like a competition that levels you up. You know what I'm saying? Like parenthood will level you up. If you are, if you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to be anything, if you want to do something, if you said one day I will do this, when you see, when you have to become a parent in the sense of taking on becoming a parent, you start to quickly realize that you have less time for certain things. And that with the time that you have, you really want to make sure that you're doing things that please you. And if it's something that's a great passion of yours, you'll find a way to do it, no matter how hard it is. And I think that one of the things, especially for the filmmakers out there specifically, you, your story doesn't leave you, no matter when you're doing it or not, it doesn't leave you. Like, even when I don't have a story that I'm either, writing notes for or something like that, the story is always around you. And just hopping back, I was gonna say, and we don't have to get too deep into it because I gotta make a move in a little bit. But the year that I became a father, I lost my father, and I also lost someone very close to me, in the past year, and um, just it felt like chaos all around. Having to take care of a newborn, dealing with family and dealing with all this personal stuff, is still showing up to be a husband, showing up to be a father. It's showing up for myself because especially at those times, I really needed to show up for myself, um, and make sure that I take the time I needed to reflect, to grieve, to do what I needed to do. And that idea of showing up for yourself, of stepping into the ring with yourself, essentially, is something that takes a lot of grace. It takes a lot of forgiveness of yourself, of who you were, of how you operated. All of that kind of has to fall by the wayside, and which is why there's no room for that ego, because you need the space that ego takes up to fill with grace, to fill with the things that you truly need for yourself. And with that comes being creative, trying new things, you know, uh, finding, people may fall off. You may find different people that you're gravitating towards, and allowing those shifts to happen. Essentially going with the wave instead of trying to fight it is probably the most, I mean, crucial thing that got me through my last year of dealing with so much energy changing and shifting around me, and still managing to run a creative business, mind you, but also be creative, have my own projects that I'm working on, things that really turn my gears, other than, managing someone else's creativity, which I find myself doing a lot in the business of it. So I was able to, I put out a short film at the top of the year. I am in post production with another short film that I just did, while still finishing uh, 4 client projects. Like, I was able to do much more than I would have assumed that I could have done before I was a parent. Like, now I'm a parent, I'm operating at a completely different level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm just in a completely different atmosphere of myself, which makes me feel even more like, damn, there's new levels to hit. Like, there's more. That's why I did that mile. I recently ran a competitive mile, and I just got that feel like, yo, I could do that too, and I think that's important for any creatives, for any parent out there, for anybody just trying to be in a capacity of championing themselves, really stepping up to it and recognizing that you don't have control when you don't have control, and that that will return to you. You're not you're not you're not you're not letting go of something and losing something essentially. If you're always in the mindset that you're gaining, yeah, the writers are on strike, but I'm sure we're going to see a boost of creativity in the next coming years. We're going to see something so out of the box that we never even thought of, without this pressure. And I think kids do the same thing. Kids are like, yo, your whole schedule out the window. They don't even think about that. Like,
Right.
uh, but I think, it's a level up. It's definitely a level up.
All right, bro. I know you got to go. So is it like you mentioned the short film that you dropped at the beginning of the year, and the one that you're working on? If you don't mind sharing with those some of your projects that you've done, so people can look you up and like engage with the content.
You could find SmallWarner is my last name.com. SmallWarner.com. You can find all my work there if you want to just check out. I'm like, yo, is he really nice? All you filmmakers out there, I come from old school filmmaking, so like, the integral DNA of it is there for sure, for sure. And then you could check out the short film that I just put out on there. It's called Brianna. We shot it and was able. That's a whole nother conversation, but we were able to shoot it at a certain cost and then make it a donation based. And we were able to achieve at least a third of the cost without doing any marketing. These are small signals that like direct to consumer is possible, but I won't even get into that. Rihanna is on the site, and the next one I got coming that I'm super excited about. It's a mobile film specifically. I shot it natively vertical. I wrote it and directed it with an amazing team, amazing actors. This is going to be Vertical Motion Pictures, the brand and company that I run. This is going to be our first narrative piece. It's called Killing a Laverne. A lot of things that I tend to create as an artist deal with mental health. And it's been like that for a while. I didn't know why it was like that at first until later on in my journey. But so that's all the things that I got going on. Verticalmotion.pictures is the site. You could also get to that through smallwarner.com, and at SmallWarner is my everything. Like you could find me on Twitter at SmallWarner, Instagram. You could Google SmallWarner, and I'm like the first 5 pages on the benefits of having an interest in me.
Yeah.
So
you even took there used to be a hyphen. You took the hyphen out and everything.
Oh yeah, and I got that done. That's actually that was my legal name change as well. There's a whole story behind that, but yeah, there's no more hyphen in my name. Just SmallWarner. So that's me. You can find everything there. I appreciate you allowing me to be on and share some time with you. It's good rapping with you.
Likewise.
I haven't talked to you in a while, and obviously I've heard some updates from Dom, because me and him rap all the time.
Yeah.
But I was super happy to hear about you becoming a father. And we definitely got to wrap offline because I know there's more to the story.
Yeah, for sure.
So whenever you
yeah, I got you. All right. Well, Steve, I appreciate you coming on. Guys, as I always say, be the best version of you because everybody's already taken. I wish you peace, patience, understanding, knowledge, wisdom, discernment, health, strength, resolve. Be easy because every choice has a consequence and every action has a reaction. But love y'all and be easy. This episode is brought to you by Apple.